I was looking for some bookshelf plans that weren't the usual boring straight across shelves, and I found these on Etsy. I used this set as a starting point and made some changes, but I'll leave a link to the original plans in the video description. The first page provides an overall view, the next page displays the dimensions for each piece, and the third page includes a cut list, labeling each piece with a letter to simplify construction when you reach that step. The cut list called for 5 8-foot 1x10s. I rarely work with construction lumber anymore, but I made an exception for this project by purchasing 1x10 pine rather than 4/4 poplar in random widths. I saved on costs in two ways. The first is that the price per board foot is less than half that with pine versus the poplar. The second way I saved is in labor costs. If I'd used poplar, I would have had to rip several boards to the desired width and then run them through the planer to achieve the desired 3/4 inch thickness. My time is valuable, and since I planned on painting this shelf, pine would be a suitable choice. Additionally, I plan to use this as a display shelf in my retail store. It will be placed in a section of the store set up to resemble a child's room. The painted pine piece will look more like something built by a weekend DIYer than if I made it from poplar. I purchased 6 6-foot 1x10s rather than the 5 8-foot boards listed in the plans because that's the longest I could fit my car. A quick calculation told me that it should be enough lumber. I set aside 2 of the boards for the sides, part A, and went to work cutting the rest of the parts to the length shown in the cut list. I penciled the part letter on each piece to make assembly easier. It was when I started cutting the parts to length that I decided to modify the plans. They called for 45-degree bevels for many of the joints. I don't know about you, but the thought of cutting 45-degree bevels at each end of a 6-foot board and the end of 2 3-foot boards is not my idea of fun. I'm going to use 2-inch screws to hold everything together, as the plan showed, so I believe a butt joint will be strong enough. I then cut all the parts to length using my radial arm saw. The first cuts were for the 36-inch top and bottom. I've done enough rough carpentry to know that I was going to lose 1/8 of an inch to the saw blade curve, so I centered the blade on the 36-inch mark. That resulted in 2 pieces that were each 35 and 15/16 long, which we called close enough for government work in the Army. After the top and bottom, parts B, were cut, I proceeded down the list to systematically cut the remaining pieces to length. If you don't have a radial arm saw, you can use whatever appropriate tool you have available in your shop. It was fun to measure and cut my way through the list. When I was done, there were just a couple of short pieces left as waste. I'd purchased the perfect amount of 1x10 for the project. All the parts are cut, so I can proceed with making the subassemblies. I'll start with attaching part E to part D. The E attaches to the middle of the D, and the D is 15 1/4 inches long. Doing the math in my head, and mumbling the figuring out aloud, half of 15 1/4 would be 7 1/2 plus 1/8, or 7 5/8. But there's an easier way to find the middle of a board with no complicated math involved. I set the part D flat on the counter and brought my tape measure over to it. Rather than measure out 7 5/8, I'll pretend I can't do the math, or I'm unsure of the answer I just came up with. Here's a trick for finding the center of any board. I hold the 0 mark on the left side of the tape measure on the left side of the board, and then I move the measure diagonally across the board until a number I can easily divide by 2 is even with the right side of the board. I can easily divide 16 by 2, which equals 8, so I mark the board at that point, and I know it's the exact middle. This tip comes in especially handy with odd measurements that are difficult to divide by 2. If you need to divide the space into, say, 3 sections, then move the tape to a number divisible by 3. If I needed to do that here, I would set the right side of the tape measure at 18 and place marks at 6 and 12. Voila, les measurements. I used a square to mark the center line across the piece, and then I set the 2 pieces up on edge to join them with 2-inch screws. The plan suggested that the screws be countersunk and covered with plugs. I'm going to ensure the heads are driven below the surface, but just enough so I'll be able to cover them with wood putty. Since I'll be painting the shelf, I don't think I'll need to go to the extra work of using wooden plugs. I brought two drills to the bench to make the task as fast and easy as possible. With the first, I'll drill a pilot hole for each screw. I highly recommend doing this whenever you're fastening boards together with screws, especially when you're near the end of a board. Without a pilot hole, the wood is prone to splitting when you drive in the screw. Use a drill bit with a diameter nearly the size of the screw's shank. If the pilot hole is too small, the wood still may split. If the hole's too big, there won't be enough wood left for the screw's threads to cut into, and the fit will be sloppy. By using a second drill, I can drive the screw into place immediately after drilling the pilot hole. You can never have too many tools. I have a 1/8 inch drill bit in the blue drill and a Phillips head driver in the DeWalt. I drilled the pilot hole near the top and the center line on the board where I wanted to use the screws. The second board was aligned to the spot where I wanted it to go, according to the plans. I kept the two boards in place to ensure the pilot holes I just drilled stayed aligned, and I used the DeWalt driver to add the first 2-inch screw. I flipped the assembly over and drilled the pilot hole near the second end, and then I added a second screw. I didn't have to move the assembly to drill and drive the third screw. This thing is solid, so I set it aside to build a second one just like it. The pine is soft enough that it was easy to drive the screw heads slightly below the surface. The next step will be to add 2 more boards, part C, to each side of the D&E subassemblies that I've just completed. Once I set the boards in place to visualize the layout and then identified what needed to be done, I realized the counter space was too small, so I moved the parts over to my workbench. I clamped part D into my vise to keep that subassembly in place. I added part C to the top. In the original plans, these parts are joined with a 45-degree bevel on both ends of part D and the ends of part C that are attached to them. The other side of part C has a normal 90-degree edge to butt up against the side of the bookcase, part A. I decided to use a butt joint instead of a bevel because the screws would provide sufficient strength. What escaped my notice is that this would throw off the final assembly, but we'll address that shortly. It took a bit of a balancing act to drill the first pilot hole and drive the first screw, but that screw held things together well enough that adding the other 2 screws was not a problem. When I flipped the assembly over to add the second part C, I had to go through the gymnastics once again. We've got an alphabet soup of parts here, so I added labels to hopefully prevent any confusion. Everything falls into place when you have the plans in front of you. There will be 2 of these subassemblies. They're identical, but in the final assembly, the open ends will face in opposite directions. After I finished the first CCDE subassembly, I set it aside on the floor and built a second one. When I laid out the parts on the floor, minus the 6-foot sides, I discovered what my change to the plans had done. Because I used butt joints where the plans called for miter joints, the middle came out longer. I had 6-foot sides, but the measurement from top to bottom, or bottom to top if you prefer, now came to 75.5 inches. It was 3.5 inches too long. There were 2 possible solutions. One option was to return to Menards and purchase 2 8-foot 1x10s, then cut them to 75.5 inches long. However, this presented transportation problems and would have left me with almost 4 feet of number 2 pine 1x10 scrap. The easier solution was to shorten the total length of the subassemblies by 3.5 inches. The parts F hadn't been screwed into place yet, so I shortened each of them by 1 inch. That left 1.5 inches to be removed from G, but I had a better idea. I could assemble the entire bookcase without part G, then measure it to see if this rough assembly gave me a number that was slightly off. This way, I wouldn't be stuck with a part that was a little too long or a little too short. I could get the just right Goldilocks measurement. I brought the sub-assemblies and 6-foot sides to my retail store for final assembly. The completed bookcase would have been heavy and awkward to move from my basement shop if I assembled it there, plus it would have been difficult to get into the car without help if it even fit. This way I could move everything alone and save a lot of heavy and awkward physical work. At my age you have to work smart, not hard. Due to the change I made from miter joints to butt joints, I have a slight problem once again. The top and bottom, part B, are 36 inches long, but the CCDE subassemblies measure about 34 3/4 inches long. This means that because I'm not using mitered corners, I can't mount the top and bottom on the inside of the sides. I'll have to mount them on the bottom and top of the sides instead. However, as I examined this and measured everything, I realized it would work. There will be a slight overlap of part B past part A on each side, but just a fraction of an inch. I think it will look okay. I drew a line across the side where I wanted to drill the pilot holes to attach the subassembly. There's a table just off to my side where I rested the drivers and kept the box of screws. The shelf unit is resting on the floor, part hand job of a trapdoor that leads to the basement. I believe this building dates back to the early 1900s, and it has a full basement. However, the stairs are wonky and there are no handrails. I doubt they'd meet any building code in the country, so if we ever decide to use the basement, we'll have to rebuild those stairs first. I temporarily turned the second subassembly, the one on the right in this video, upside down to provide a more stable surface for screwing the parts together. With it in its final position, the whole bookcase was too wobbly. After I had the first 3 screws in place, I set the unit flat on the floor, then picked it up and added the second subassembly. The whole thing was solid at this point because 2 shelves were touching the floor from the first subassembly and 1 from the second. With all those screws in place on one side now, the bookcase was sitting on a 6-foot long side, and adding the opposite side was easy, even doing it solo. I completed the assembly process yesterday, and my main task today is to add wood putty to cover the places where the screw heads were driven below the surface. My business partner at the store, Debbie, stopped by to check out the shelf late yesterday. As we examined the shelf on one side and discussed where I planned to use it, we concluded that I should use the shelf as it is currently sitting, horizontally, not vertically. If I use it vertically, the top of the shelf will be too high for most customers, and either of us, to reach comfortably. In the horizontal configuration, I'll have a 6-foot surface on top and several small display areas. In fact, by using the unit horizontally, I can even add a couple more dividers to create additional cubby holes for displaying small items. This will be going into an area set up to look like a child's room. The decision was made. I'm going to use this horizontally, and I'll paint it tomorrow with that in mind. There'll be no need to paint the part that would have been a side, but which will now be the bottom. I stopped by the Ace Hardware store just a few blocks away from my store before I opened this morning. I picked up this little jar of wood putty and added and mixed up a quart of paint in a light blue color. I'll let the putty dry today and plan on painting tomorrow. I used my fingertip to apply the putty where I needed to cover the screws. I know from experience that this dries very slowly, so that's why I'll wait until tomorrow to paint. If you've been to the paint section of a hardware store or a big box store, then you know what a vast selection of color choices exists. I'm colorblind, so distinguishing between subtle differences in hues is well beyond my abilities. I told the young woman in the paint department that I wanted something in a light blue and what I would be using it for. She recommended the base coat and then showed me the available color tints. The color chart called the shade Ashwood Gray, but both women working the front of the store agreed it was a light blue, and so did Debbie when she saw it later. So either the description isn't accurate or I was conned into letting them mix up a shade of gray rather than a blue. I purchased a set of 2 brushes along with the paint, but when I started painting, I found the larger of the 2 was too wide to fit into a 1-quart can. I guess I'll save it for the next painting project. I started on the top shelf since we decided to display it in a horizontal position. The paint went on smoothly and it appears to be a good match for covering the pine. There's no need to show me painting the entire shelf, as watching someone paint a surface isn't much more exciting than watching paint dry. If you find this mesmerizing, you could rewind it and watch it over a few times. Here's the bookcase display, moved into place in the portion of the store set up to resemble a child's room. I had to take these photos using flash photography because it was late afternoon and we were at the tail end of a violent thunderstorm. The white wall behind the shelf took on a blue tint due to the reflection off the shelf. I'll show you the rest of the room for context, then what the shelf looks like with some merchandise added. The new shelf shares the east wall of the room with an oak toy chest and a pine bookshelf I built several years ago and moved to the new store when I opened it in late May 2025. The next photo shows the north wall as well as the corners of the east and west walls. The display in the middle will feature some fabric added to it to create the appearance of a child's bed. The last two photos show the west wall of the room. At either end are display shelves that I built years ago when my wife and I sold craft shows. I can remove the shelves and fold the frames to move everything in a van or truck. The shelf in the middle was built from a kit I recently purchased online. It's 4 feet long and 3 feet high. I bought it because I needed something inexpensive quickly. I came back the next day and filled the shelf with some toys. Partway through building it, I thought about adding some extra dividers so that I could display more items, but now that I have toys in place, I like what I see. Sometimes less is more, and seeing a few items spread out may be more effective than as many items as possible crammed into the space. What do you think? Should I add more shelves or leave this as is? Today's project was unusual for this site. I needed another display shelf for the store. I wanted something different, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time making it or a lot of money on materials. It's the kind of project you might want to build for a grandchild's room. What do you think of the project and the sneak peek at part of my retail store? I'm currently working on a farm toy set, a Jeep Wrangler model, and another tool review. Until then, suggestions for videos to watch next are on the screen now.